everybody, to today's episode of Let's Chat. I am your host, John Brents, Director of Community here at Twitch. I also go by Kawaii Guy. I've been a broadcaster in the space for the past 20 years, and I love nothing more than sitting down with fellow broadcasters and talking about their journeys, their experiences, everything they've learned across the entirety of their career. Hi, welcome in, everybody. If you're here in chat and you want to hear a great conversation today, let me see some dinos. I know we had a bunch of dinos right at the start while we were getting ready to go live. Let me see those dinos in chat, everybody. I'm very excited for today's conversation. I have an incredible broadcaster joining me on stage, the one, the only, AshSaidHi. Ash, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm great,
just so
especially now
happy
that
to
I
be
see lots
here.
of dinos.
Oh
Lots
yes,
of dinos in
I
chat,
love the
loving
dino.
us.
Yes, love it, love it.
Well,
Hi
I
everyone.
kind of wish we had a BTS portion for not the band, but rather like a backstage, because we had a great conversation as we were getting started for today's show about your experiences, your learnings, and things that we definitely want to talk about. So for those of you in chat, if there's anything we're talking about in regards to topics you want us to expand on or ask questions, feel free to do so. Use !ask in front of the question. That way it'll prompt for us to take a look on our front. But we're going to dive into the convo. I figure, if anything, Ash, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell all these wonderful viewers a little bit about yourself and where it all started for you.
Oh my gosh, of course. So, hi everyone. My name is AshSaidHi, and I started broadcasting in March of 2019. I am coming up in about 15 days on my 5-year anniversary, which is really amazing. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And my focus is on retro games, collecting, gaming memorabilia, and playing, lots of Nintendo and classic consoles and connecting with people through the joy of retro gaming. Most people introduce me as the queen of the stream. And, I try to have like a little bit of a Mr. Rogers wholesome vibe, like there's not really a lot of like, rage inducing moments, but sometimes video games do be video games and, we try to get through them. But, because those retro games, they don't hold your hand,
They do not
so
hold your hand.
they don't.
Granted, they did introduce the Game Genie and stuff like that to help us a little bit with that hand holding. I do want to shout out, you already have so much love in chat. Chaotic Gab's coming out the gate. Can you let Ash know I think she's amazing? Well, there you go. I mean, you
Oh,
have love clearly in the chat for everything you've been doing. And as a fellow
no.
lover of retro games, I'm continually impressed with the collection that you have accumulated over the years. Obviously, behind me back here, I have my prize and collection when it comes to Earthbound and all the Mother series. But I guess for you, was there a particular game that like sparked this love for you early on? That was just like, ooh, I want to go deeper down this path of Nintendo collecting or anything else. What was that game for you by chance?
So it wasn't really a game per se. It was more the fact that my mother and father are very big gamers. In fact, my mom still is to this day. Like, she was texting me the other day when they announced that Elden Ring DLC expansion.
Yep.
And she was very excited. And I was like, Mom, here's the link to go watch the premiere. She was very hyped about that. But we've been playing video games since, the early Amiga Commodore days. My dad had an Amiga 500. An NES, Super Nintendo. I used to play lots of Super Nintendo RPGs with my mom, like Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, Eye of the Beholder, Lagoon, all those kinds of things. I have like very clear memories of playing these games with my family. So it was really that sparked it from since I was very young. And eventually, as I started, like getting my own job and making my own money, and I would travel, like at the time, a lot of video game licensed merchandise just never existed like as much as it does today. So anytime I would see it in the wild, I would get it. And the first thing I ever got, there's a Mario plushie back there in the plushie pile. That was the first like licensed merchandise thing that I ever got. And I got that on a trip to Los Angeles because I went to E3. And that's kind of what sparked it. And then obviously like all the games and stuff, anything that wasn't like a video game, pretty much, that's kind of what sparked it. So, and I've been collecting ever since. So
Wow.
that's
Well,
where
it's
you get
definitely
all this today.
It's paid off for a wonderful background with all of your with all of your setup and everything. I guess let's dive into a little bit about, because you've had the experience of obviously growing up with a family, playing games, discovering that love of games, but then you went into university for, what was your degrees again that you ended up getting?
So I have a degree in communication design, and that
Mm,
encompasses advertising, graphic design, a little bit of marketing, and then I took, like web design, photography, and all that kind of stuff. I also went to school for art and illustration. I transitioned from that into what I got
mm,
my degree in, and I graduated with a 3.8 out of 4 years. I missed one day of school. Like, it was very intense, but I would say that a lot of what I learned in my communication design degree I apply to my work as, a
mm,
Twitch broadcaster. The skills very much translate, and it's incredible that a lot of the things that I learned apply so closely. So for example, creating the brand of my channel, the Ash Said Hi logo you see above me, I did all of that stuff myself, like an illustrator, and created all my own panels, my own overlays, and all that stuff. And the importance of having a concept behind your design. My professor taught me about the idea of having a concept behind your design is incredibly important, because your concept is what tells a story and is the thread between every execution that you have. And the reason why that's important is because consistency is important when telling a story, and for people to understand who you are and what you do, it's important to have that consistency and that string that tells a story of what you want people to know about you. So all of those
mm.
things translate into what I do today.
I love that. And I know there's a large collective on the internet that is sort of averse to this concept of calling yourself a brand, or thinking of
Yeah,
yourself as a creator as a brand. But what you're
right.
hitting on is effectively, it's true for every storefront, it's true for every performer. Figuring out the consistent through line with what you're performing or what you're showcasing on your broadcast is key to attracting an audience, and ultimately then sell and attract in potential supporters, whether that's sponsors or it's, your viewers coming in to support your broadcast. Tell me a little bit more about that thought process of, like, when you're establishing a brand, or how you learned about it back in university.
Sure. So, understanding your demographic and how you want to speak to them is key in those decisions, right? Because you can't, like, it's almost impossible to get everybody, right? Like, when you think about like an
Mm,
ad, right? Like, the ad is not going to target people from age like 12 to 99. Like, there's no way you can specifically talk to a person if you
mm,
don't have an idea of who you're talking to. So for me, I know that I want my channel to feel very welcoming. Like, that's the whole idea behind my tagline. Don't forget to tell your friends Ash said hi. It's supposed to be like a warm, family friendly kind of, oh, we're connecting with people kind of like on a like Mr. Rogers style kind of
mm,
wholesomeness. And because I have made a clear decision to have that kind of vibe and feel and that language, it's going to attract a certain kind of person. And because I know like this is the kind of person that I want to talk to, I know specifically how I want to talk to them. So whether that's through maybe some of the colors that I use in my logo, or some of the ways that I present myself on stream or through my social media, there is a conscious decision about why I use the type of language that I do and the way that I present myself. So when people come to my channel, it's make sure to interact with chat, right? Like, chat
mm,
interaction is extremely important. Whereas maybe for like a speed runner or somebody who has like more of an improv entertainment show, that might not be specifically what they aim to do. But if I
mm,
know I want to have like this sense of, people throw around the word community a lot. Like, if I want it to feel like I'm directly talking to you, and then the people who I'm also talking to in chat is directly talking to each other. Like, I say things like, "Hey, thank you for welcoming each other in chat. Thank you for,
mm,
being present and being in the moment and being very concise with how I, direct the vibe of the show
mm.
is a part of creating that, that space that we want to create, that demographic that we want to create.
Exactly. And I think this is something that many broadcasters really need to spend a lot of time on before going live, creating the shows of which they want to showcase, because ensuring that you yourself as a broadcaster have confidence in this is the way that I'm going to execute this show, or this is the way that I'm going to present myself. That way, when a potential viewer is to arrive, they can then understand, is this a show for me or is it not a show for me? Is
Exactly.
this, a group that I eventually want to be a part of? Because a lot of people throw around the word community, like you were mentioning community, and they're like, oh, I'm community focused. Well, not every community is, a community for me or a community for you. And it's the same way when all of our viewers come through, even on those shows, are you there for the conversation, or is there actually another space that you can head to? And there's plenty of spaces across the internet. You don't need to be fully invested in every single broadcast, and you as a broadcaster don't need to appeal to everybody, because if everybody loved the same
Right.
thing, the world would be a very boring place. It would be an incredibly
Right.
boring
Right.
place. So owning your own is part of that.
Right. Like we were talking before chat and we were saying like you're not going to go into a cupcake shop looking for
Mm-hmm.
lollipops. Like that's just doesn't make sense, right? Like that's just not going to make sense. So if I know I want to make a cupcake and I want to have the
Mm,
best cupcake that people are going to like show up for, I'm going to get a line around the door. I want to make sure my icing's right. I want to make sure that batter's correct. I want to make sure that I really craft the product that I'm making. And so,
yeah.
in terms of broadcasting, how that could translate is, am I making sure that I'm utilizing all of my tools? And when I utilize all of my tools, am I coming across consistently and am I doing it
Mm,
with care and integrity? And am I making sure that I'm just putting a little thought and story behind the way that I want to communicate the experience that people are having. So for me, that means when you come into my channel, I'm going to welcome you. When you come in, we're going to have like really fun, lighthearted conversations. It might not be like, about like super duper like off topic stuff. Maybe we're talking about the game, but we're also talking about the joy of retro games and nostalgia.
mm.
And like, I feel like sometimes, we talk about like we're variety broadcasters, right? But let's really think about what that means. And if we can define that term and put a meaning behind it and say, well, I want to be variety, but I want to have a little bit of direction, like that direction is actually going to serve you way more than saying, I just want to be everything for everybody. Like if you have a clear direction of where you want to go, you'll start to find that you're going to connect with people because then there's something more in common than, oh, I just want everyone to like everything that I do. Like
Exactly. I like
that's
the
very
comparison when you were
difficult.
saying about like the cupcake store. I think this is a fine way that we can compare it. If you think of yourself as a variety broadcaster or somebody who, dabbles in a lot of different things, you could be, just like the variety cupcake store to go on this. You have vanilla cupcakes, you have chocolate, you have all these wild flavors, and perhaps you do that. Perhaps you are just the person who does one thing on your broadcast. Perhaps it is you play one game or you do one type of performance. You just have that single great construction that could be like the vanilla cupcake that you're selling, and that is the only thing you sell. So as a consumer, they know what they're going to receive. If you are
Yeah.
just throwing stuff at the wall, and I want to talk about this concept of throwing stuff at the wall in a second here, but if you're just like, okay, I do chocolate and I do cupcakes and I do chicken sandwiches and I do this, and you're throwing all these things out there, when a consumer walks in, they're gonna be like, well, what should I buy? What's good
Right.
here is going to be the question. And then that's going to be sort of like the driver for like, well, if people really love this particular thing, perhaps I should give them more of that thing. But we were talking
Yeah.
about like the concept of throwing stuff at the wall, and we talked about multi-streaming or placing our broadcast all over the internet. And I'm curious your
Yeah.
thoughts. I have my personal thoughts when it comes to multi-distribution of the same type of content, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Oh, I have some thoughts about it, chat. I love that the option exists, right?
Mm,
Like you're saying, everybody has a different workflow, everyone has a different mode to success, right?
mm,
But I think it's really about working smarter and not harder. And I feel like while there is an option for me to multi-stream, I feel like every platform speaks to their audience in a very different way. The way that I speak to somebody here on Twitch is vastly different than the way I speak to somebody on YouTube. And again, even more different than the way I would speak to somebody on TikTok or Instagram. And the reason why is because maybe the way that the viewer interacts with the platform is different. And I also feel like before I can think about just plastering my channel everywhere without being concise about how I'm thinking about it, I really have to understand, am I entertaining? Like, I feel like I would personally need to sharpen my skills in improv and like speaking and things like that before I can decide, is this going to work across like an entire stadium of different platforms? And I feel like, the solution for me personally is not to just multi-stream and make people find me everywhere. I gotta make sure that I'm good first. And when I have proven that I could just hit go live and everybody's like, okay, this is awesome, like I'm good, like then I'll think like, okay, I can just be everywhere. But I feel like too a big problem with just multi-streaming without giving it any thought is like the idea of live broadcasting and interacting with chat. Like everybody in chat can see what each other is saying, and that's really important for like you know understanding the conversation and just like knowing like where's this coming from. But like if you have some chat here and then some chat on another space and some chat on another space, and people don't know who's saying what where, and people don't even know who you're talking to and what you're talking about, it's gonna be like really confusing for the viewer who's trying to connect with you and the other people in the audience. So before I
yeah,
decide to do that, I want to make sure that that is like the right decision to make for
yeah.
what I'm making.
Well, especially for new
Yeah.
viewers coming in, they may be timid to enter into a conversation if they see the chat is all over the place. Like I see some people in the chat currently, they're contributing to the conversation. They're feeding back to what we're talking about. Others are
Yeah.
memeing. Others are talking about other stuff. And it's so, it's one of those things where think about what you're constructing for your current space and what you're trying to showcase. So that way a person interested in the content can come through and watch and enjoy before you begin to theorize and say, okay, well, now I'm going to open that portal to another chat room or another
Yeah.
service that has different understandings and different algorithms and different ways that your content will be showcased or discovered. Like think of what are the ways that I want to approach each of those spaces, because they do have their nuances. The way I used to look at it is like YouTube is based on search results. What are people looking for in the given moment? How would they be finding that content in a search ecosystem? When you're looking at Instagram, that's effectively like a magazine portfolio for how you're showcasing you, yourself, your brand. How are you showing up in the vertical format if you're broadcasting via Instagram, or
Yeah.
TikTok could be similar. So each of these have their different nuances, and just going live on all of them with the same type of content may not be the best strategy in the approach. And so that's why I want to
Yeah.
say keep thinking about how you want to distribute across there.
Right. And I love, you know what? There's two things I want to touch on that
Mm,
you said. So you talked about memes, right? And I
mm,
feel like, okay, in a lot of like Twitch channels, and when we talk about community, right? Like, this is one thing that I feel like is applicable when we use the word community is like when we have a little inside joke, we have a little ritual that we do. Maybe there's like a certain alert that people like to spam, or like channel point that people like to spam. That becomes our thing, right? Like that's
mm,
why a part of the reason why coming to that person's particular channel is a unique experience versus a different channel. And that is incredibly important for understanding how you connect with your audience. We have this little
mm.
joke, you do this little thing, you give me like 100 bits, this little thing pops up, and it's really funny. And that's a part of the reason why I love being there. But that becomes disconnected when you have that happening, and then people in the other space are like, well, what's going on over there? I'm not, it's
Mm-hmm.
like that cat meme. What they doing over there?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that. It's like, I don't get it, but that's why I feel like it's really incredibly important to be thoughtful about how you want to present yourself and the spaces that you don't have to do everything in every
Mm,
space. Like if you focus on a space and like, okay, like for example, I love focusing on retro games. I
mm,
love that, and anything that feels retro, and that's something that I want to own. So any of my posts on Twitter is like, oh, look at this cool Super Nintendo game I just picked up from the retro game store, or look at this super awesome Mortal Kombat, 1 t-shirt that I picked up at Target, like, or, look at this experience that I went to. I went to like the arcade, the pinball museum. Like those are all like, it's very curated, and it's curated
mm,
for a reason. I'm trying to talk to a specific group of people because that's who I want to connect with, and that's an extension of who I am. That's,
mm,
you're getting me through that. Like you're getting, who is Ash? This is Ash. This is the thing that Ash loves. This is who I am genuinely. Because if we met in real life and like
mm.
we were just hanging out, like TwitchCon, we outside the venue, the show's over, we're chilling. Yeah, I'm still talking about, oh, you ever played this Super Nintendo game called La 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 whatever?
And then we
And
lose all
that's
of our hours of
all
talking about
me.
the things we relate to. So there was actually a good comment
Yeah.
posted by Barry Hendelson in the chat just a bit ago, or rather a comment that they were talking about the concept of distribution and comparing it to global reach. And so obviously when
Yeah.
you're thinking about distribution of content, I could compare this to licensed content that ends up being distributed worldwide. Shows that I grew up with, like Seinfeld gets worldwide distribution, Friends gets worldwide
Yeah.
distribution, things on Netflix have
Yeah.
worldwide distribution. Now, when you think of global expansion of content, there is an important element to thinking, how can I cross barriers with what I'm creating? That's absolutely
Mhm.
vital when it comes to expansion of a business. I think what we
Mhm.
were talking about there at the gate is ensure that the product itself out the gate, before you lean into licensing and redistribution, that you have a great show or something of which you
Mhm.
think can be applicable in those territories. And then there are features like you were shouting about, like, hey, think about like the ways that you would diversify or like shift that content perhaps for the different mediums of which you're ingesting to. There are toolkits, like Barry Henderson shouted out, like about the chat features, that there are abilities to merge chats so it's easier for the broadcaster to understand where they're coming from each area. I think that the
Mhm.
key element here is each base coming through different areas has a different intent and may have a different approach to how they
Mhm.
interact with the show. So that's something to be
Mhm.
mindful as a broadcaster. And once you have that groove set, absolutely explore redistribution of your content. Consider doing a simul broadcast on the outside, but really it is focusing and making sure you have a great foundational show first before you expand out. And I like this one from Please Play Again, but what about interdimensional distribution? To be
Mhm.
determined soon. Like, it sounds like
Ooh.
science is making progression that we might be able to break into metaverse theory here pretty soon. So we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can
I
do.
love that. I
When
love
it
that.
comes, we were talking about this at the start of the show before going live. When
Yeah.
we think about our reach on the internet and the numbers that come, I was talking about this with Sensei CJ about, it's very important to remember that every viewer is a human, in the same way
Yes.
that like the broadcasters are human, and that relationship is a one-to-one. When it comes
Yeah.
to scaled viewership, the impact of scaled viewership may not be to the benefit of your business. It may have like good numbers wise, but it may not be a converting audience. I don't know if you want to expand on like what's the difference between those two based on your understanding of marketing or working with brands in the past. Like that navigation of strong dedicated viewer versus passive viewer.
Right. We did talk about this a little bit earlier, especially in the fact that, like, okay, so we were talking earlier, chat, about how, my degree in advertising and things like that. And
Mm,
something that is really, really interesting is like a successful like banner ad, for example, like a click-through rate of like 0.0001% is like super successful, and this is like brands spending like millions of dollars on like banner ads that they hope you see and hope you click on. Like they hope that's like it, not even guaranteed like, oh, this person is going to click on. But what's really important is for us, as broadcasters who have dedicated communities and dedicated people who we directly engage with, that is like super duper gold, right? Like that is super duper gold. And we need people to understand that, especially when it comes to sponsorships and things like that. But like we have a unique edge where we can like say, like talk to like our audience and have like a direct interaction, a direct understanding of who they are and who we're talking to. And having an audience that really cares about what you do, like it is such a valuable thing. And sometimes people feel like you have to like have a really giant supersized, like, oh, thousands of people watching, thousands of people chatting at the same time. And that is one form of success. And I applaud and appreciate all of that success. But not all success has to look that way. You know what I mean? And having an audience that may be a little bit smaller, but more directly engaged, more directly supportive, more directly like invested in what you're doing can be so enriching versus just having like a chat that's like going like super duper fast and not really knowing who's in your audience. So there is reason for both and there is great success for both, but I feel like it is equally as valuable to
Mm.
have an audience that's like really invested in what you're doing and maybe like more closely related, because yeah, it's gonna be difficult having a conversation when your chat is like either really really large or just like it's not the same as like when it was like you're able to like have an individual conversation. I feel like we need to appreciate that. And I really want to see more creators get out of the what do you call it? Imposter syndrome of, oh, my
Mm.
channel's a certain size. Do I really own the success that I have? Because you do. You are successful. You are successful. Like, the fact that you're doing is way more than people who say and then never show up to do. You know
Yep.
what I mean? You should value that. You should definitely value that.
Yeah.
Be and be
Have
I
focus
am
on who's
super
there.
thankful. Right!
Like,
That's what
yeah,
I
have
was just
focus
gonna
on
say.
who's
Sorry
there
to cut
and
you
not.
off.
No, 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 no. But that's exactly
Yeah.
right. Is like, think of who is there and not who isn't. Give them a great
Right!
performance and a great engagement and a great show.
Yes, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Be like, that is one thing that I tell myself. In fact, like I got this little Twitch like light up box for Black History Month like a few years ago, and my saying on it is the gratitude mindset. And
Mm.
that means to me being thankful for who is there and what I have now, and not worrying about what I don't. I can't control what I don't. I can control what I have. And
Yeah.
that's all I care about.
So this is actually a comment from Crash they just posted here. It's a problem to find viewers and talk with them. Recommendations not working correctly. A lot of people like to watch and not chat. So there is the differences when, obviously viewer intent, some viewers want to come in, they want to be active in your chat room, they want to join in the conversation. Then there are lot of subset of individuals on Twitch that prefer the lurking experience. Like, for example, I watch a lot of
Yeah.
Twitch on my Apple TV in my living room. It's not easy to chat on an Apple TV, so I'm not going to be able to join in chat, but I'm going to enjoy the show that's being produced. I guess how do you approach that separation of giving a great show in the event, let's say the majority are lurkers during that day?
Oh my God, that happens to me all the time. And
Mm.
I, okay, you know what? I love anytime I go, I was telling somebody the other day, right? I love streaming. I love streaming. It makes me feel so happy. Just the act of doing it. It's kind of like, because, I also do art, right? I also like love to paint and draw. I love the act of drawing. Sometimes the drawing does not come out great, but the
Mm.
act of doing it is what's important to me, because every time I do it, I sharpen my skills a little bit more, or I find some kind of intrinsic value in the art of performing. And let's say we have a day, okay, I play a game, chat's a little bit more quieter than normal. All right, you know what I'm gonna start doing? Acting up. I'm gonna start narrating everything I'm doing. I'm gonna start being a little bit more loosey goosey with my, like my mannerisms. I'm gonna start, maybe bringing Bobby onto the show a little bit more. You see her little foot right here. I'm gonna start, say like, saying what's going on the screen, being a little bit more,
Yeah.
funny about what I'm doing, and maybe like learning how to invest in skills outside. Like if I see that maybe it's a consistent thing and I want to try and change the outcome, okay, maybe I'm gonna take an improv class. Maybe I'm gonna take a speaking class. Maybe I'm gonna take like look up some lessons online for how to be more engaging, how to have good conversations. Read a book about how to start like conversations with people, how to have good openers and things like that. And just be on. Like that's the fun part to me, is like performing and just being in the moment and engaging with whatever it is. Like
Mm,
not relying on chat to be my entertainment, but relying on the game. I'm going to be the entertainment. So
that's right.
that's kind of how I try to deal with it. You know what I mean?
I think there's great recommendations there for additional like classes or courses or ways that you can expand on your skill sets. You should always be, I encourage every person in this chat to be in a lifelong learning phase. You should always be learning new skills and expanding on them, whether you're broadcasting or, doing something professionally. I actually brought up in the chat the concept of how do you get comfortable with effectively like broadcasting as if you're speaking to yourself. The easiest method that I've recommended for people who are just starting to broadcast is to talk about everything that you are visualizing on screen. Let's say if you're playing a game, let's say I'm playing Chrono Trigger. Okay, I'm going to the inn in this portion. I'm going to be buying these few items here. Oh, actually, I realized that potion, like you start to talk about all of the elements so you're always on and
Yep.
engaged with what you're performing regardless of if the chat is there or not, because you have to think as well as, if you're live for, let's say, 2 to 3 hours, which is what I typically recommend for the length of a show for people, about 2 to 3 hours, take a break, maybe come back, do another show if you want to do more. But during that phase of time, to think about, I need to always be guiding towards a mission or a goal in my show. So
Yeah.
at any point, if a
Yeah.
person steps in, they can catch on quick to what I'm doing. Because if you're silent in your broadcast when a new viewer comes in and you're not talking for, let's say, 5 to 6 minutes and you're just doing your thing, they may not stick around. And honestly, seeing people go in and out of broadcast all the time is something that I would say is an issue in the
Yeah.
space. And it's something you have to be thinking about as a broadcaster. I need to ensure that my storefront's open and welcoming to somebody who's coming in for the first time. Otherwise, you may lose out on
Exactly.
that customer.
Yeah, ABC always be chatting, That's
Mm,
how I look at it. And I'm gonna point out somebody in the chat right now named
mm,
Control Alt Quinn,
yeah.
because they taught me a little bit of what we're talking about today too.
Mm,
Narrate. It was literally exactly what you said. Narrate everything that you're doing. Narrate everything that you're doing, because
mm-hmm.
then people are gonna be like having something to engage with versus
That's right.
nothing. Yeah, Quinn is amazing. I learned from Quinn. So that was the perfect call out, and that comes directly from learning like improv too. Like, oh, this is okay, so now we're gonna press the A button, and now Chrono Trigger is gonna do a little dance with Gato, and then we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
earn 15 silver points, and so
You're at
yeah,
the Millennial
you
Fair
gotta
right
get used
now,
to
but
that.
you're narrating all those elements, and
Yeah,
then you're
yeah.
gonna
Now
go
they
and
have an idea of where we
yeah.
are, what we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yes, I think it's really, really, really important to kind of just be in the moment, and that's, I don't know, it brings me joy. It brings me joy.
Now let's talk a bit about like we were talking about obviously viewership impact, brand ownership. Let's say an outside sponsor
Yeah,
is coming to you, and this is a conversation we navigate pretty regularly. And honestly, and this is something that I say
yeah,
on every show, every single one of you that broadcast, your life is going to be a roller coaster. Some days you're going to be high in viewership, some days you're going to be low in viewership. What matters is continuing to show up and continuing to produce about what you love And that is how you're able to maintain a long career. That's the only way that I've truly survived in the space for 20 years, is knowing some days will be great, some days will be rougher than others. But when it comes to
Yeah.
talking with a brand, a lot of brands will approach us and say, what's your followership count? What's your viewership
Yep.
count? And then they're going to make that booking just based on the data side of it. And people worry, if I'm not of a certain data point, I'm not going to get the job. What would you
Yes.
say to
It
folks who are worried about that?
Oh my God, it is yes, it is such a important conversation to have because I feel like the health of the creator space is definitely, supplemented by how much people are getting paid for their work and how much
Mm.
work they're able to get, right? Like I think that that's a really important conversation and definitely a conversation that bleeds into, some problems that we have. Like Gothalion has been talking about, inflated viewership
Mm-hmm.
with like embeds and things like that. And one thing that I really want people to understand is that, and we touched on this earlier, is your accomplishments as a broadcaster is not only defined by how many people are following you and how many people are actually watching you. I wish that sponsorships looked more at like chat engagement and
Mm-hmm.
chat interaction as a metric, because if you have a chat that is like super duper engaged and always interacting with you and clicking on the links that you're posting, like if I ever do, let's say I do like a charity, for example,
Mm.
using a bit.ly link and then being able to calculate how many clicks
Mm-hmm.
you got based on all of the charity like moments that you had, and saying, okay, I earned, like, let's say I raised $3,000 and within that $3,000 I had 500 people click on the link. That is so much more valuable than
Mm-hmm.
how many people are following, how many viewers are watching at that exact moment.
Yep.
Those are the metrics that we need people to look at and really understand, because it scales for anybody of any size. So if I have a channel and maybe my average viewership is 25, right? But within that 25, within those 3 hours, I had, rolling through, like 50 people click on a link because they're always rolling through. It's always a revolving door. That is way more valuable than having a viewership that looks like 3,000, but
Yep.
100 people clicked on a link. You know what I mean? Like
That's exactly
you
it. And
need,
Barracourts, I love what they said.
yeah.
Like, say it louder for the sponsors in the back. This is going to require collective effort from the community to educate on what metrics matter to us. I tell people, like, your follower count really doesn't matter. It may matter to you in terms of the progression of your career and a status symbol, but really, a follower is one person at one point in time who clicked a button saying they like you, and that's it.
Yep.
I look at people
Yep.
with millions of followers, myself included on the YouTube front, but here on Twitch, there's people with millions of followers. Do they have millions of viewers? No. And that's something to
Right.
constantly remind yourself of when you think of the growth of your career. The follower count is a nice little metric to say, I got those people in the door. What matters is who is showing up show after show after show. And that
Yep.
is what
Yep.
matters for the brand too, is the conversion potential of your audience.
Exactly. 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 And that was, especially what you're saying, right? Like somebody who followed is just somebody who said they liked your channel. It's like they're bookmarking you for later,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you can show, like, okay, we talk about community. What does that really mean? Is that just somebody who's like talking in my chat? Is it somebody who's also interacting with me on maybe Discord, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever? Is that somebody that, like we talk, directly as a group in Discord? Or is it like a group of people that's also communicating with others, even if I'm not in the room? Like CJ Sensei talked
Yeah.
about that. And it is so true for his channel. Like CJ don't gotta be there for all
Mm-mm.
those people to be talking to each other. They talk without him,
Mm-hmm.
and that I feel like is a really prime example of what excellent community building is
Mm.
here on Twitch.
Yep.
Like they love me, but I'm the thread that brings them all together. But
And it's
they
the same
also
thing that
like
I
being in
find
a
on this front. And it's
right.
like community curation into
Yes.
introducing them to each other, encouraging them to create together or hang out together.
Yeah.
Like, there's ways that you can build a community. There's also ways you could curate community-based experiences that don't require you to be present. And especially
Right.
for yourself as a growing broadcaster, you want to find means for the community to find ways to get together on their own, and you not always have to be there, because you
Right.
can't always be on. You're going to get a gig that takes you out of, the state or the country to produce. Like, you're going to have to produce work on other services. You have to always be thinking
Yeah.
about that. Random Red shouts out, some channels have very active offline chats. Like, I think of like
Right.
Jax Films as a person I've worked with for many years, huge in the YouTube space, came over to Twitch. People are there just sitting in his chat room before and after the broadcast, or they move over to the Discords to have the further conversation. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things of, think about how you're curating those experiences, because the top line number, like you're talking about the embedded viewership, and there are some good use cases out there for embedded content to support an event. It's similar to the redistribution of like syndicating on other services. But if it's
Yeah.
the sole purpose is to gain a viewership total that really isn't there, is that really beneficial for your business? My gut
Right,
tells
who's
me
that
no.
serving? Yeah,
Yeah.
who's that serving? That's not serving anybody because it's like empty, right?
Yeah.
This is why I really love this conversation that Gothalion is bringing up, because what does it mean? Not only what does it do for the economy of broadcasters, but what does it do for the idea of broadcasters outside of the sphere, for people who know this space, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
people who are outside and they see, oh my gosh, this person has 3,000 views, but there's nothing going on in the chat. Like,
So
this
that's
doesn't
the thing.
seem.
And so the gut would
Yeah,
be, the bounce rate would be pretty substantial, because Rat King calls it out. It boosts your
right.
discoverability in the section you're streaming in. So yeah, currently you can organize the categories based on like low to high, high to low, or you can go based on recommendations or previously watched. So it could impact there. And at initial
Yeah,
thought, you're thinking, oh, in the same way, if like we go outside and there's a crowd standing together and they're all looking up at the sky, more than likely you're going to look up at the sky too. But if you
right,
realize they're all just standing there, there's no conversation, they're all just standing there, there's nothing to look at actually, you'll leave the group. So the bounce rate for them is going to be huge. So it may get a
right.
person in the
So then,
door, but they're going to leave immediately after.
right. So what does that do for the economy of what we're doing, right? That's showing
Mhm.
people like, oh, it's not really like it's like a big like flashy thing, but it's not really like holding my attention. It's not keeping me, like,
Mhm.
this is not something that I really want to engage with for a long time, right? Which
Mhm.
is kind of like, I feel like that's why talking on Twitch is like completely different than talking in a space like TikTok or somewhere else, because Twitch people like to perch, right? Like, people like to sit, they like to watch, they like to engage, or they like to lurk. And that is like where people want to stay. But then if they see like, oh, like something, like, oh, the numbers are really big, really quick, and it looks like it's like something interesting going on here, but nobody else is really talking to each other. Like, well, what am I like, that's not like what we wanna put out there, you know what I mean? Like, I don't
Yep.
know, but
Yeah. No,
oh
and
my
there's a few
gosh.
comments like coming in here, like when it comes to like
Yeah,
discoverability, like some folks will call themselves a smaller broadcaster or smaller streamer. If anything, I want you to get rid of that verbiage that you'll call yourself a smaller streamer. You're not a smaller
yeah,
streamer. You are a host, you're a performer, you're a musician, you play this instrument, you're a speedrunner, you are an analytical creator. Focus in on what you create, not on the number that is present. So I want you to get that out of your vocabulary. But the understanding of, hey, well, I'm a smaller broadcaster, there's these others, who have the higher viewership, they may be getting that initial eyeball in. um there are issues, I would say, like with general, like with populations, when it comes to what I refer to as like viewership paralysis, in the same way that like I'm comfortable with putting on the programming and the people that I'm used to encourage people to discover you then requires a lot of strategy externally to
yeah,
tell people about your programming, or collaborating with people on the service, or becoming members of their community or in their chat room, so people start to know who you are and then discover after the fact, oh, you broadcast too. Like, I think of people in my
yeah,
own community who started broadcasting. Now
right.
my viewers will go watch them. They're not promoting in my chat that they're going live, but they got to know each other, respect each other, and they bridge out.
And I love that. I think that's why things like Stream Together is awesome, right? Can we
Mm,
just talk about that for a second? Like,
yeah.
it is such a great tool for others, to get to know each other. And I really do think that that is a great way to grow. Like when we all rise, what's
Mm-hmm.
that saying? We all rise like
Just we all rise
together.
together, and then like remember to
Yeah.
send the elevator back down too, because people, like any person who has achieved any resemblance of success, and some people have the upper hand. They come from money, they had resources, connections, all this stuff. There will always be those cases in our industry, especially in entertainment. But
Yeah.
know that
Yeah.
everybody started at zero.
Yes.
Everybody
Oh my
started at
God.
zero.
It's so true. Like, chat, when I first started broadcasting, I would broadcast 3 days a week, 3 hours a day, right? And I feel like there's this misconception that you always have to be streaming, you always have to be live to like grow your viewership. I mean, yes, there are different methods to earning success, but I don't feel like you can perform your best if you're constantly working at something and putting effort into something that's not like, having a direction.
Mhm.
Like, it was more important for me to understand how I wanted to speak to people versus just always talking all the time. So I think that that's a part of why I was able to achieve success in streaming, 3 to 4 hours. And still to this day, I usually don't stream more than 4 hours a day each time I go live, because I feel like I'm not going to be my best self if I'm,
Mhm.
overworked or tired or not bringing my energy. And
Mhm.
before I forget again, yes, please get small streamer out of your vernacular. Get it out
Mhm.
your vernacular. Somebody is small. That's not how
It
numbers
needs
work.
to go.
There's always going to be a smaller number versus another number. That's how numbers work. Like,
And the
it's
numbers don't
just,
always go up, despite what like the stock market wants to tell people. The number doesn't always go up. And there's actually a good
yeah.
point that Undercover Strawberry just said in the chat. If you put in effort, you'll see the effort you put in grow. And growth
Yeah.
may be in the form of viewership. It may be in the form of capital money coming in. It may be just personal growth. I know for a while I was doing
Right.
co-working broadcasts, and I'm like, I'm going to practice my Japanese language learning live with my audience because I know I'm growing something out of this, and that's my own education. And so you have to
Yeah.
decide what that is for you for your growth journey. And so I
Yeah.
think that's a great comment that they made.
Yeah, and I love what Ray is saying. Maybe you're a beginner. Maybe you're still on your journey. You just starting out. Like, it's a marathon. You don't want to just,
It is.
run and, use all your energy in the beginning, and then by the time you get to, like, maybe 5, 6 years in, you're like, "Oh my God, I'm burned out."
And and
Like,
and that's the
oh
thing
my
is like
gosh.
the average career of individuals in our space, let's say from the point of them starting to create to they maybe have a success cycle to they leave, typically what I've seen
Yeah.
is a 2 to 4 year career, and that's it. Think
Yeah.
of it for yourself of how are you positioning for the marathon, for the long term, taking it at the right
Right.
pace and discovering for yourself, is this something that I want to keep doing in this way? And you may pivot at different points in your career. I started off, I found success on YouTube with sketch comedy back in the day. That then pivoted into gaming brand development, working with StarmanNet and Fangamer, and then eventually bridging into the content I'm producing now with Kawaii Guy. It changes over the period of your life, but as long as you are continuing to iterate and grow yourself in that personal growth, you will find success one way or another. And so I just want people
Yeah.
thinking about that as they're moving forward.
Wait a
Um,
minute, you worked with
yeah,
Fangamer? That's, like, super cool. Like, I have
StarmanNet.
Fangamer merch in my room. Oh my god,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
The Earthbound community is what
What?
launched the entire career. That's why I got the cast tattooed on my arm. Yep.
I love
Little
that.
stories
Oh
there.
my god, that's so cool. Okay.
So,
But yeah, chat, like,
yeah.
you just gotta do your best. That's all that we ask for. Just do your best, and
Hmm.
just, find the joy in what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So as we wrap up here, we're about to wrap up our conversation. I do want to ask if you were to give one key piece of advice to every person here who is a broadcaster or a community organizer, a community manager, a moderator in chat, how should they be thinking about their approach from this day forward after listening to our conversation? What advice would you give to them?
I would say, please try to develop a concept behind what you want to do and be mindful about how you present that concept and how consistently you present that concept to the world. Because when people interact with your channel, they don't get a lot of time to get to know you. And if you have a clear and concise concept, you can share what you're about in a succinct term, like you in
Mm,
succinct words, like in very, very short terms. So it's easy to do what you do if you know why you're doing it, if you know what it is you want to do and why you want to do what you're doing. That's what
yeah.
I would say. And consistency is extremely important.
Recommended reading for anybody out there that wants to expand on this topic, or even go and you can watch. There's a TED Talk by a guy by the name of Simon Sinek called Start With Why. And he talks about, obviously when we lead into most conversations with what we do, then we talk about how we do it. Rarely do we talk about why we do something. And if you lead with why, that is what's going to hook in audience interest, emotional connection, and ultimately connect you with folks outside, including brands. So really think about that why statement. Ash, what are you going to be broadcasting this week? What can people look forward to? You obviously cover a wide gamut of games. What are you doing right
Yeah.
now on your side?
So I play lots of retro games and Nintendo games. Yesterday we were playing Oblivion, which was very hilarious and amazing. But I usually do Oblivion on Mondays, Tuesdays, and I usually do like some kind of retro game. Thursdays we do Star Trek Online. We're big Trekkies, okay? And then Saturdays we play Amiga games, so that's retro. And then Sundays we do other retro stuff. Like last Sunday, Chat was teaching me how to play Capcom versus SNK 2 and Tekken
Nice.
1. I'm not playing Tekken 8. I'm playing Tekken 1, chat. Okay, that's my speed right now, and Soul Calibur 2. So it was a really fun time. And thank you for giving me the space. Thank you for this very wonderful conversation. It's been such an honor to be here on the stage with you all. And yeah, thanks for hanging out with me, y'all.
Heck yeah.
I
Well,
really appreciate it.
honestly, the honor is ours to sit across from you for this conversation. And once again, thank all of the chat for
And
joining us.
I
Oh
have
my
to say,
God,
Bobby has to
kitty
say
cam.
hi.
There we go. Let's
Yeah,
get the cat on
Bobby,
cam.
she has to say hi, of course. This is
Oh,
the
that's
real
the best part of
star.
the broadcast.
Yeah, this is Bobby, everyone. That's my
Bobby
girl.
is the best. Oh my
Yeah.
heavens. And you can catch me later today. I'll be playing Pokemon Scarlet Violet over on Kawaii Guy. For those of you who are Poke fanatics, just like myself, I look forward to seeing you in there. And once again, thank you for joining us for Let's Chat, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.